Thanks for joining me today. I am back with part 2 of my interview with Roger Monk. And Roger is a Grammy and Juno Award-winning recording and scoring engineer with over 50 years of experience in the industry. He was the chief engineer at Little Mountain Sound for 18 years and then went on to open his own Dick and Rogers Sound Studios in 1990 and has been involved in the production of dozens of motion picture scores, countless television movies, and album projects for artists like Bryan Adams, The Tragically Hip, AC/DC, Motley Crue, Josh Ramsey, and Michael Buble. So we can't wait for you to hear all the rest of the goodness that Roger has to share with us. Let's get going. Well, and I can't remember who I was, it might have been Jeff when he was on the show that I was saying, I don't think that most people understand how much studio time often goes to detective work, right? You're like chasing down why something isn't doing what you think it's supposed to do, or where that little hum is coming from, or all those pieces that so much of the time, life in the studio, it is not just plug and play. It is not going to work perfectly the first time you do it necessarily. And that just gets you extrapolate that out when you're working with the size of session that you're talking about. So that piece around the time that you spend mapping it out ahead of time and setting it up and testing it before anybody else is in the room, that's really important time, because then it's not, then they're not also paying musicians while you and your team are trying to track down anything that isn't quite flowing the way you want it to, right?
Well, I have been shocked. I went to see a session not that long ago. Again, I won't mention who and where and why.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed up, and the session was due to start at 9:00, and they started setting up at 10 to 9. And that absolutely floored. No, it was a small session. It wasn't a big one.
Yeah.
It was a quartet, a string quartet. But they started, and I was just shocked.
Yeah.
But I guess that's inexperience, I guess, Sarah, and it's only because I've done it for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
and I expect to be able to produce myself. It's not only what everybody else does, but I need to know that I'm ready to go, and if there are any delays, it's not because of me.
Do you think you can decline to answer this if you decide that that's what you'd like to do? Do you think that that comes entirely from inexperience, or do you think that there is a difference in sort of work ethic? And work ethic isn't entirely encapsulating what I mean, but I guess it's the closest we're going to get. But, sort of work ethic that maybe is perhaps a generational piece.
I think it is just inexperience.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants to do a good job, Sarah.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to. Doesn't matter how much experience you have. You want to be able to do and perform and create something that everybody's happy with.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any argument there. But it's only because a responsibility, I guess, but an inexperience of not knowing that at 10:00 or 9:00, even if it's just a band coming in, that you're ready to do it and you're ready to perform.
Yeah.
And that you've got it covered, that you know all the mic pre's work.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that you don't have something that's out of phase or an issue, so that you can confidently do your job.
Yeah.
And I think that's inexperience. But I think the majority of people will pick up on that pretty quickly. If not, they shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've done lots of stuff for like film and TV, and then you've done lots of stuff for pop and rock artists. Do you want to talk about how those processes differ?
Obviously, the film and TV and orchestral and big band kind of things tend to be with professional people,
right?
As opposed to a band's. But even a band like Motley Crue or AC/DC, they're professional too,
of course.
But they come in with a little bit different of because it's more casual there, and they're creating their own music,
right?
And they're not really worried so much about the clock.
Yeah.
and timing. Because there's no when we're working with an orchestra, we're dealing with the union, and everybody's being paid by the hour, and you have to work 50-minute hours, and you have
Right.
to give breaks and all that sort of stuff. You know, rock bands don't worry about whether they've had their break or not.
Right.
I mean, and they'll come in when they're ready, when they feel they're ready to record, and they want to be creative.
Hmm.
So there's a slightly different feeling of being able to creating your own album, creating your own music, as opposed to coming in and playing somebody else's music.
Yeah.
See, it's a bit of a difference there. At the same point, I remember one of the last things I recorded at Little Mountain was an orchestral overdub with Metallica.
Hmm.
And they used to come into the studio to start their work at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'd work all night long. Well, they came in at 10 o'clock, whenever the downbeat was, and the orchestra was sitting there in the studio, and we'd already got sounds, and they were tuned up and whatnot, and the band came in. And what blew them away, and they you could see it in their face, was their music
Hmm.
being played by a band, by an orchestra.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there was a synergy. There was still this relationship. They were all musicians and appreciative of what each other were doing, but they were blown away that instantly their music was being played, and
Yeah.
it sounded good. They didn't have to keep working on it, or because it had been arranged, and
Yeah.
people were coming in. So we weren't creating something; we were playing something. Does
Yeah.
that make any sense?
Absolutely, it does.
It was already planned.
Yeah.
So, and I remember at the end of the session, they turned to the band and they said, you know, thank you for coming in, and they used some language I won't use right now, but they said, you guys are really good. And, you know, of course, the musicians were
Yeah.
tap their music stands because they were pleased to be able to contribute to the album as well.
Of course.
We're,
Yeah.
we're all artists, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything that you wish artists or clients knew before working with you that would make the whole project smoother or more successful from their point of view? Like what could they come in with being better prepared or doing differently that would contribute to everything working better?
Well, I've been very fortunate because I can't think of many examples when people haven't been prepared.
Mhm.
And what I try to do is, from my perspective, I worked on actually a television special not that long ago at the warehouse, interestingly enough.
Mhm.
And it was an orchestral recording for this project. And the composer was there and his arranger and whatever, but they hadn't had a lot of recording experience. But they came in, and what I try to do is we do the first run through, and I want to turn around and see smiles in their faces.
Mhm.
We were able to do that because they were prepared. They had all of the charts checked and planned and out in the music stands and pencils and all that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
there wasn't anything that could really slow things down. And because we were able to, again, plan the session ahead of time, get basic sounds even before the musicians arrive, as ironic as that sounds, so that the first run through and they can hear, wow. So you get everybody relaxed. You
Yeah.
don't want to start the session with everybody really tense like this,
Yeah.
you know. So that's my biggest aim. So it's just preparation and making sure that everybody has all the information of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the final result's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Um you have collaborated with a lot of other artists over the years and do you want to talk about that sort of collaborative aspect of making music and what that really entails from your perspective?
I think there's so many different examples and variables, but I think one of the important things is that, yes, we have individual responsibilities, but at the same point, it's a team effort.
Mhm.
As a performer and as a producer and as an engineer and as an assistant, we're working together as a team. And although we have responsibilities, there's gray areas, and everybody contributes. I'm not going to go out and sing or perform, but at the same point, it's we all know what the desire is,
Mhm.
and everybody puts in suggestions and thoughts and ideas, and you know You may give a phrasing or breathing suggestion to a singer
Mm-hmm.
that maybe they hadn't thought about. And again, it's not that I'm becoming a performer, but it's just a suggestion and a thought, and it's a team effort. I think
Yeah.
that's I think the thing to remember. It's a group effort, it's a team effort. As a performer, engineer, technician, that we were working together to get one result.
Yeah. I think that's a really important perspective. You've worked at, my guess is you have worked at a lot of studios over the years, and probably not just local ones. Do you have any favorites? Like favorite recording settings for favorite studios?
Ah, boy, that's an interesting question. As I mentioned earlier, the warehouse is probably one of the best technically maintained and equipped facilities,
Mm-hmm.
certainly in Vancouver. It has some issues from my perspective, from an acoustical viewpoint, but as a technical and as a facility I'd like to go to and work with, absolutely, as one of the top of my list. CBC Studio One is a great facility physically to record in.
Yep.
I don't particularly like the equipment they have there, but it's totally silent. It's in the bowels of the CBC.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Absolutely zero sound. You don't hear any air conditioning or rumble or anything. It's a beautiful location. Uh, but even studios I've recorded in Los Angeles, I mean, there's certain things that, wow, this is really nice. And there are things, well, that could be better.
Yeah.
So the one place I would really like to record, of course, is Abbey Road.
Yeah.
I really hope that before I totally hang things up, I'd love to go and do a session there. Hal, Vince, and I have sort of fantasized about maybe doing something there one day.
Yeah. I think that's sort of, I think that's a real pinnacle. Um, I can't find the word that I want right now. I'm having a little moment.
We all do this.
But I think it's that sort of dream goal. It's got so much history to it, right? Abbey Road.
Yeah, and there's some interesting articles on the internet that people can dig up if they're interested in reading about it. It got saved at the last minute. It was due to be pulled down and made into a parking lot.
Oh wow, I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. There's some interesting stories that you can look up, and there's actually some footage of one of the first performances in there.
Hmm.
Some old vintage footage of the musicians walking in and tapping their music stands as the composer. And his name escapes me from a minute, but he's a famous English composer. This is in the 30s, I think.
Hmm.
Um, Land of Hope and Glory, I believe, is the piece they played. Anyway, there's some rich history there, but yeah, it just got saved at the last minute.
Wow, wow, I didn't know that. I will have to go and find some of those articles, and
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff if I
that would be great.
see
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Um, you have had a very successful career spanning,
not
I
that
think,
long.
yeah, spanning more than a few years. But I mean, really, honestly, spanning 50 years, that's a huge accomplishment in this business. What do you think creates longevity in this business?
Wow, that's a interesting. Well, certainly you have to have a certain amount of luck,
Yeah.
and in the
Yeah.
right place at the right time, and you have to have opportunities. But when you are given the opportunities, make sure you come through.
Yeah.
Uh, that it's a responsibility, and it's what we do and what we like to do. But yeah, fulfill the responsibilities. But you have to be lucky as well.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things, Sarah, that I've never got to do that I'd love to have got to do. So I didn't get everything going my own way. I mean, I was very fortunate in '85 when we recorded the score for Platoon, which won best sound and best music at the Oscars. And I mean that should have been or could have been a potential springboard for me to do some
Yeah.
other stuff down there and more film work that I didn't do. But I have had some success as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot to be thankful for, but it could have been better as well.
Yeah. What's your bucket list? What are the things that have not, the kinds of projects that have not been put in front of you that you would love to do before, as you said, before you hang it up completely?
I'd like to be spending more time recording music than we are these days.
Mm-hmm.
To be perfectly honest, I get to do maybe 4 or 5 projects a year.
Yeah.
I'd like the phone to be ringing little bit more often. I'd like to do some more recording with some studios in Los Angeles or in London, of course. Love to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think the other thing is that we all have our own ears and our own techniques. And I mentioned earlier, I do things that seemingly work for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I try things that I see other people do that don't work for me. And I've seen people try to do things and copy what I do, and it just doesn't sound the same. So I think it's just all these little techniques that all come
Yeah.
together. But there's a certain sound that I want to go for, uh, and and I listen to some big film scores, and I think, gee, I'd like to I'd like to have recorded that because I think I could have made it sound the way I like it to sound.
Yeah.
And that's really the key is to listen to the work that you do. That's your calling card.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You can't you you can't fool anybody. It's either sounds good or it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's your work.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Like
there's
taking a
no,
picture and saying this is my work. Well, listen to what I've done, and
yeah.
does that sound okay?
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, watching up and coming um folks in the business, all the different aspects of the business, all the different kinds of work in the business, is there anything that you see where younger people coming up, that where they're missing something or they're misunderstanding something that could improve their experience?
Well, one of the biggest things, and one of the things I think is a real challenge to me when I listen to a lot of music that is being recorded today, is how the dynamics are not being left alone anymore. Everything is squeezed up and pushed up so it's 98, 99% all the time in music. And I really miss the dynamics,
Yeah.
that range. And I talked to Andrew Dowden about this, and he hears both sides of the thing, and it's what people expect to hear and how they expect it to be mastered.
Hmm.
You see, I remember going back, Sarah, when digital first basically was
Yep.
came along. When we were recording in analog, there was a certain dynamic range that we had to work with, and there was a certain there was tape hiss that we had to deal with. So
Hmm.
Dolby came up with ways of excuse me, noise reduction to control that. So when digital came along, we thought, wow, this is great. Now we don't have to worry about tape hiss anymore,
Hmm.
and now we can use a bit of dynamics. But what has happened is that everything is sort of being pushed up louder and louder and louder and louder. And I don't, although I've been doing this for a long time, I don't 100% understand why,
Yeah.
but it's what people expect to hear. And
Yep.
I think I think it's missing something. I hope
Yeah.
we come back to some dynamics. I think because people want to put their tune on, particularly contemporary music, and it sounds louder than the other piece or just as loud. Whereas, what's wrong with having something develop?
Mhm. Yep. It's funny. I actually talked to voice students about that concept. I mean, it's not from the recording perspective, but just from a performance perspective, developing a song, and that you don't do the whole song here. There needs to be an arc, there needs to be a development, or you're not telling a good story. And I think it's sort of, you're talking about the sound design version of the same concept, right? That dynamic change helps, it helps tell a story.
Yeah, I mean, even in contemporary music,
Yeah.
I still see it. Obviously, in classical music, there's dynamics, and
Hmm.
there is even but even a lot of country and western music today, they squeeze it up like this, and it's
Yeah.
just everything's loud as opposed to having some shape to it. I think
Yeah.
it's missing, but I think
I'm
I
with you
think
on that.
I'm thinking. Or are you? I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that because it bothers me, and I don't totally understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, how would so if someone was coming into it, listening to this, thinking, that's awesome, I want to be Roger Monk.
God help you.
I want that career. What would you recommend as a learning pathway for someone getting started from ground zero?
Boy, that's tough. One has to learn to listen and to hear.
Hmm.
So you need to listen to music and decipher it and pull it out and listen to what you feel is good and what you don't think sounds as good. So you need to be more analytical about the sounds
Hmm.
as preparation. I really, really believe in apprenticeship and mentorship, and do whatever you can to make friends with someone that records music that you like and that you respect,
Yeah.
uh, and then suck it all in and watch what they do and ask questions. Why did you do that, or why is this like that? And I remember when I recorded down in L.A. when we were doing the Buble session.
Hmm.
I Forgive me, I just can't remember her name now. But it was the harpist. She's the principal harpist in Los Angeles. She goes to all the sound stages and she plays. And she said to me, I introduced myself and said, delighted to work with you. And if there's anything I can do, please, so let me know. I try to make friends with all the musicians. You got to make friends with them, right? You got to
Yeah.
have this relationship. It's not us and them; it's us.
Yeah.
And so she said to me, "Which microphone are you going to use on my harp?" And I said, "Well, I generally use whatever it was." And she said, "Do you mind trying this?" And she gave me this microphone and said that it's what I feel allows the harp to sound the way I hear it when I play. And I said, I can't argue with a lady like that. So we
Yeah.
ended up using that, and it's my go-to microphone now. And
Interesting.
I learned from that, and she was totally right and totally correct. And so you have to be open to getting some suggestions and ideas from people that you respect as well. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. What is the most unexpected way that you feel you've used your talents in the course of your career?
Unexpected, my goodness.
Mhm.
Boy, I wish you'd given me some warning. I don't think that I can particularly unexpected way.
That's okay. We can cut out thinking time. You can take your time and think about it.
No, I'm just trying to think of something that I could come up with. Um, I think I'm always open to learning things myself. We recorded an interesting project. Oh, God, it's got to be 15 years ago now, called "Once Upon a Mattress," which is a musical, but that people could look up if they wish to.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And we ended up recording it at the CBC,
Hmm.
and it was a bit of a challenge because it was a rhythm section and an orchestra, and then the vocalists were coming in prior to going to the North Shore Studios to film it,
Hmm.
to record their vocals, and
Hmm.
then we'd do a rough mix of the music and then send that over, and they were miming it on the set.
Yeah.
And Carol Burnett was one of the lead singers in the show, and she really impressed everybody because she was so prepared, amazingly professional. She came in, she met my team, and then the next morning she came in to actually record, and she remembered our names, which absolutely
Oh,
blew me away.
yeah.
So ultimate professional. But that was an interesting challenge, Sarah, because it was a rhythm section and an orchestra. So we ended up actually putting the piano, bass, and drums in an adjacent studio with video
Yeah.
feeds. And then we had the the orchestral elements in the main room, and it was an interesting challenge because of the number of people involved. But the charts were so well done, so perfectly arranged. It was a pleasure for them to play.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, probably what I remember as much as anything was we had to be able to adapt to that. But again, because we were prepared and we tested everything, any little tricks that came along, we had to find solutions to the
Yeah.
problems.
And this is going to feel like a very basic question, which I know the answer to, but I'm guessing there are people who out there just getting started who don't know the answer to. And do you want to talk about why you put the rhythm section in a different studio than the orchestra?
Ah, well, that's yes. So that there was a little bit of separation. When I record an orchestra, although it's 50, 60, 70 people, whatever it would be, I like to think about it as being one instrument
Mm-hmm.
because there are all these people playing, but this is the sound we're getting. In the case of a rhythm section, particularly where you've got drums, to control the level of the drums, if it's in the same room as the band, is tough to do.
Mm-hmm.
If they're on stage in a performance like at the Queenie or something, you can control the dynamics, and it is what it is. But we wanted to put them in a separate room so we could control the balance of that rhythm section to the acoustic instruments, so that we weren't getting a lot of drums and bass drum into the flutes or the
Right.
sensitive instruments, and we were able to keep it separate and control it. I guess that's the main.
Yeah. That piece of isolation and not having the bleeding, right, of one instrument into a different instrument's microphones.
Exactly. If you could imagine putting a drum set in the middle on the stage at the Queenie, and he's hitting the drum, it's going all over the
Yeah.
acoustic, all over the room. You can't turn it off
Yeah.
or lower it. I mean, yes, you can get him to play a little bit quieter, but ultimately you want to have a bit of control over the thing, and that's why we did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely makes sense to me. Um well, are there any other just great gigs or weird gigs or
Oh, there's
any
a lot
fun
of weird
stories you
gigs, but I
want
won't talk about those right now. I think because you're basically hoping to present us to people that are trying to get into the business, and
Yeah.
it's a wonderful job to be in
Mhm.
if you can find the work to do it.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard today because we don't have the same amount of opportunities. A lot of film scores, for instance, say, are done electronically.
Yeah.
And what film scores that are done usually now are kept in Los Angeles for sort of political reasons, whereas once upon a time we used to get some of the overflow, if you will, and
Mhm.
if they were concerned about budget, we'd get the opportunities to do it. Uh, but even in contemporary music, a lot of people are recording at home,
Yeah.
and not going into. I remember David Foster saying many years ago at Little Mountain, it was probably the middle '80s, I think. He said, once upon a time, people used to have to do a whole album in a studio like Little Mountain.
Mhm.
But now you can go to Little Mountain, you can record your basics. Now we can go to a small studio and we could do maybe some guitar overdubs or some vocals. And then we can go back to Little Mountain to mix.
Yeah.
It was the beginnings of being able to record stuff at home.
Mhm.
When I first started, you couldn't do that kind of work at home. It had to be done in the studio. Now we've kind of gone a whole 180 degrees, whereas people can actually record a lot of their material on their dining room table at home
Yeah.
and never go into a studio.
Yeah.
They can record it and then into Pro Tools and use their plugins and mix it at home
Yeah.
and never even go to a studio. You go back 50 years, you had to go to a studio.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
there's a
so,
huge shift there.
so there's a huge shift. So there aren't the opportunities anymore. But don't give up. But do try and learn from people. Pick someone that you can respect and try and work with them and become their
Hmm.
mentors.
Yeah, I love that. Well, where can people find you, Roger? I mean, website, social media, things like that.
Well, I'm sure that people just, particularly these days, just Google my name and they'll come up with stuff. They'll come up with ways of getting hold of me. But
Yeah.
it's difficult. I don't have a lot of time to be able to invite people, but there's a few people that I invite to come to sessions to watch and to
Hmm.
learn something. Um, and I just wish people well. It's a tough thing to do,
Yeah.
but don't give up.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time joining me today. And I just, like I said at the beginning, I've known you as long as I can remember. My childhood, I grew up doing a lot of voiceover work and a little bit of singing work, and I just remember you on the other side of the glass a lot of the time. And so I really appreciate your time and sharing your vast wealth of knowledge.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I've known your family, your mum and dad, and your brother, of course, for a long time. And I
Hmm.
hope we get to do something again. Let's do some recording.
I would love to.
Is Josh planning another album?
He's writing the new Mariana's album right now. So
Great. Well,
that's
I
in
hope I get a
process.
call. I hope I
Uh,
get a call from him.
Give him a call and tell him to write something that you get to work on.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Roger.
Okay, you take care. Good to talk to you. Good to see you.